Hi, Linda. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here today. By way of background, my name is Sophie Alcorn. I'm the founder of Alcorn Immigration Law. I write for TechCrunch. I have a podcast. The episode that got released today, I just interviewed an international founder from Spain who his company got acquired for over $800 million. So it was a very interesting interview about how he navigated his whole immigration journey as a founder from, I think he shared E2 visa to eventually getting a green card. And then just the growth of his company over the last 15 years was super fascinating. So the podcast is available on our website, alcorn.law. And I'm here today with my amazing colleague, attorney Linda Haggerty. She's a top business immigration attorney in the country, I would say, for US immigration. And Linda, can you share a little bit about yourself and your passions for immigration?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for having me today, Sophie. So I am been practicing business immigration law for over 20 years. Time does go by fast. So I've worked at different boutique law firms. I've been at Alcorn for over a year and a half. And I've supported clients all the way from startups to multinational corporations. And I'm a mother of two teenagers. So that makes life interesting. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we have an incredible team of brilliant and caring professionals. I'm located in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto. Linda's in Massachusetts. Our team is mostly in California, Texas, Massachusetts, North Carolina. So we're remote and distributed, but we help clients from all over the world on Zoom every single day. And we've helped thousands of people come to the US through companies as well as on their own with US visas and green cards. And we're all super passionate about immigration, whether some of our team members are immigrants, some people's families have recent immigration stories, maybe a spouse. We all care a lot about helping our clients. So to kick things off, we're here today to talk all about H-1B season. As Alex mentioned, this will be recorded. You will get that as a follow-up. We are able to take live questions in the Q&A panel. You're welcome to mark yourself as anonymous attendee if you want to ask questions anonymously, but we're happy to answer those throughout, as well as at the end. We can leave some more time. So if you put a ton of questions in the Q&A panel, then I'll know to leave more time at the end to answer all of them. And if there aren't too many, then we might go more into depth on some of the slides. So we'll kind of play that by ear. But this webinar today is for people at companies who are navigating moving their teams through the H-1B lottery to have viable immigration outcomes in the United States and be able to live and work here legally and, potentially be able to get a green card one day. And this webinar is also interesting for people who are going to be put into the H-1B lottery for the first time as a beneficiary, who are being sponsored by a company and want to understand more about how the process works. And Alcorn Immigration Law is currently available to work with companies that want to add people into the lottery. So we'll talk more about that and how to work with us, but you're always welcome to send us an email, hello@alcorn.law, if you're ready to get started. So Linda, let's talk about this slide. I think there's a lot of use cases for the H-1B. What are some of the most common reasons, do you think, that people might want to, that HR might want to place their, talented team members into the lottery?
I mean, I think some companies, they use it as a retention tool if they have a foreign worker. So if you have an F1 OPT student and they're doing a great job and they'll have, 1 to 3 years of work authorization and you see a long-term pathway, I would say H-1B lottery is definitely a consideration. And it's also for people outside the US. So if you have some people that are maybe contracting for your company and they're working remotely and you'd like to bring them into the US, this is a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah. It's There's a lot of people who might use it. And I mean, you can see from this slide, folks from Canada or Mexico who already have a TN, people from Australia, Chile, Singapore, they might want a green card. So it could be a good stepping stone. Maybe even people on L1, that's not on this slide, but a lot of times L1B employees might want to be in the H-1B lottery to have more time before their green card gets resolved. It can be especially valuable for people from India and China to get an H-1B through through the lottery, because the green cards can just take so long, but there are special rules that allow unlimited H-1B extensions if you've been through the lottery. And goodness, at this point, we probably also have a variety of people working on cap exempt H-1Bs where they're maybe working part-time for Open Avenues Foundation, or maybe like a TA in a university, but they're also working for a tech company and they want to be able to move out of that cap exempt status and into like a full-fledged lottery-based H-1B that could mean that they only have to do one job, for example.
Right.
So, lots of use cases.
Mhm.
Lots of opportunities. And we're going to be talking a lot as well about some of the changes that we're seeing and how the landscape might change. But before we go into that, because it is a big year for H-1B changes, and this is actually the first in a series of webinars that we're doing on the H-1B lottery this winter, because we're anticipating some changes now, but then we need to wait for them to come to fruition. And so you can sign up for the whole series if you want of these webinars. But just to kick us off, let's talk about some H-1B basics, what it is, why it works, how it works, and why it's so desired. So, Linda, what is an H-1B?
So an H-1B is a professional U.S. work visa that allows a foreign national to work for a U.S. company in what we call a specialty occupation, meaning it's a job that requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree or equivalent. So the foreign national would need to have qualifications that align. There are also some other requirements that attach to the H-1B. So the company is required to pay the government's prevailing wage. So we do a Department of Labor assessment with our companies. And the other piece of the puzzle is the company has to show they're financially viable and they can actually pay and employ this H-1B worker.
Yeah. It's like the easy visa for professionals. And because there's so many people with bachelor's degrees who want to work for US companies, Congress placed some limits on it. And so we'll talk about that and where the lottery comes from. But in general, you don't have to prove that you're exceptional. You don't have to prove that you're extraordinary. You don't have to prove that you have specialized knowledge. It's like, is there a company? Is there a job? Is the salary high enough? Is this a job for professionals? Great. So it's like a great entry level work visa, or a great work visa for individual contributors or new hires, people right out of university. Okay, so Linda, where does the lottery come from?
So there's a congressionally mandated cap for the number of first-time H-1Bs that can be issued, and it runs with the federal fiscal year. So as of April 1, 85,000 H-1B cap numbers become available. And within that pool of 85,000, they carve out 20,000 for those with US master's degrees or higher US degrees. So there's this whole process, which I think we'll take a deep dive into today, where companies can register their employees and we can support that into the lottery. We'll know by April 1 if they were selected. There's just such a high demand for the lottery. So we've seen the number of applicants swell over the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I remember I first started practicing as an attorney in 2008, and that year it was the recession and the financial crisis, and it was like November and not all of the H-1Bs had been used. And then fast forward and it's like, wow, hundreds of thousands of people want these 85,000 spots. Lottery. So,
Yeah.
okay. And, we see H-1B holders coming from all around the world. We help people from every country. There is a large amount of people on and seeking H-1Bs from India as well as China, but also Europe and the rest of the world as well. Okay, So if you're a US company and maybe you have thousands of employees, or maybe you're about to hire your first employee, what are some of the things that companies need to understand about their responsibilities if they want to sponsor folks for the H-1B?
Yeah, I mean, one key thing is, they are going to be responsible for the legal and filing fees. I don't know if it's on the slide, but that just is one of the first obligations that comes to mind. And then as far as the obligations within the petition, they're committing to paying this foreign worker who holds H-1B status the prevailing wage for the duration of employment. So if things slow down, you can't, what we call bench an H-1B worker, you have to continue to employ them or end employment. The other piece is just demonstrating that you're not, the work conditions aren't adverse to other similar US workers. So the pay is kind of comparable with what you're paying other US workers. And then when we look at termination, what happens when that employment ends and the company decides to part ways with the individual, the obligations are to offer them essentially the cost of, reasonable transportation back to their home country. So I like to just to say a one-way airline ticket. I mean, not first class, but something reasonable. And
Yeah.
then that individual also gets a 60-day grace period. So they could, once you have an H-1B, you can essentially port that H-1B to other employers if you're in status.
Yeah, and so we have seen layoffs in the tech industry and big tech over the last year and a half or so. And in 99% of cases, laid off individuals find another job or another status or go to school. So the chances that a company needs to get an airplane ticket or reimburse somebody for an airplane ticket are very small, but it's good to
Yeah.
just understand what could be required.
Right.
Okay, so now let's shift our attention to what is involved in the process. And over the last, 5 years or so, we've had this new electronic registration system, and USCIS is digitizing, and it's made our lives a lot easier as immigration lawyers, but it's also had some effects on the process. Back in the olden days, we would print out tens of thousands of sheets of paper every H-1B season and take boxes and boxes to the post office or UPS every day, mailing all this stuff in April. But now we have an electronic system. So Linda, how does this e-registration system work?
Yeah, you're bringing back some memories of like filing hundreds of cases,
I know.
and just to wait to see if you got selected, and then you get the mail that comes back to you, and you get, 75% of your cases get
Like
mailed back. So
stickers, labels, staples, two-prong thing,
awful.
all of
Yeah.
that, colorful
Yeah.
paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so what's great about the registration is it's like a pre-qualification. So they have opened up this registration window in March where you can log into a USCIS portal, you create a company account, we have an attorney account, and you can register individuals that you seek to sponsor for the lottery. And then they do an electronic drawing in the middle of March. And then if the individuals are selected, we'll know by April 1. And at that point, you pivot to actually preparing the petition and submitting it to USCIS.
Yeah, so we're accepting new clients right now. Our fees will go up on February 20th, so that's in about 3 weeks. So if you're on this webinar and you would like to consider hiring us to do your H-1B registrations, you should really let us know like today or tomorrow. Even if you have a partial list of the people you've confirmed you're willing to put in the lottery, it's very beneficial if we could start with that. And then if you need to add a few more people later, it works as well. But we'd love to help you, but we really need to know now because we're carefully planning our capacity.
Mhm.
Okay, so and here's an overview of how this whole thing works throughout the year, because when you put candidates in the lottery now, and the portal will open sometime in March, and then we work with you through this electronic process to get everybody into the lottery. The earliest possible start date for folks is actually October 1st. And so we're filing H-1Bs by June 30th for everybody who was selected. Maybe in summer there will be another lottery. what can you say about that? We didn't have one this last cycle, did we?
So we had one waitlist round this last cycle, but they were talking about another waitlist round. So because
Oh,
they, when companies say they're going to register somebody in the lottery, circumstances change. So if that individual is selected and then ultimately a petition's not filed, then that will open up more numbers. So historically, we have seen most years a waitlist round selection. So the last filing date is June 30th. Then USCIS will recalibrate, see how if they received 85,000, and then we may have a lottery waitlist round in July or August.
oh, that's right. This year, a lot of people were disqualified. So we had that second round. Yeah. So okay. So H-1Bs have been really in the news, and we'll talk about this more. But essentially, last year they released data showing that people were trying to game the system because candidates were getting job offers from multiple employers at different companies and getting put into the lottery many times. I think one person had over 80 different companies put them into the lottery.
It's crazy.
Um, we don't recommend that. But it was technically legal, right? And then there was also what looks like happened. Several companies cooperated to put shared candidates into the lottery and register the same person 5 times from each of their companies, something like that. Um, so the government disfavors this. They want the lottery to be fair, and they want to make it so that each foreign national beneficiary has one chance in the lottery of being selected. So there was a lot of deduplication that happened last year, so that led to the second round of the lottery. So
Mhm.
it does happen. It does happen. Um, okay, so that's our general timeline, and we'll be talking more about those changes. Uh, and here's a question, and this ties into our slide. How to make an appointment with Alcorn for generalized H-1B questions, how we book that, and is it possible online? And so, yeah, I mean, we have consultations with potential new clients all the time. Linda does, I do, Corey and Lana, the other attorneys at Alcorn do as well. We reserve many appointment slots every week to talk to people. And we have a few different types of appointments. If you are representing a company and you're interested in engaging Alcorn for all of your H-1B registrations and to run your immigration program at your company, we're happy to talk to you. We can make those appointments complimentary. If you are an individual seeking personal legal advice about how to navigate your own H-1B process with your employer that Alcorn's not representing, we offer options to book paid consultations for legal advice in those situations. So the way to get in touch with us, and we'll include this at the end, but it's simply to email us hello@alcorn.law, and our intake team will send you our questionnaire, ask you some questions, and then give you the appropriate booking link to our first available attorney who can answer your questions. So feel free to include your questions when you reach out to us, and that'll help us get you to the right person as soon as possible. So Linda, let's say somebody is interested in hiring us to help their candidates, and maybe they have existing employees on J1 and OPT and STEM OPT, and they have some contractors in Brazil that are software developers, and they just want to figure out how to put everybody in the lottery. How can they start making sure that they're prepared?
Yeah, I mean, the list of documents and information that we're providing here is essentially what we'll be asking for when we collect documents and information to do the assessment for H-1B. So for the companies, we have a list of things that we're looking for. We will need a point of contact. We'll need to know the US job title, salary, job duties, and then a bit about the company's operations. And then from the actual candidate, we'll need copies of their educational documents, immigration status, passport bio page. But typically, as you mentioned, Sophie, we have our Hello at Alcorn. And the great thing about that is if you reach out to us and you give us the candidate's information, we can then email them our immigration questionnaire. And that is reviewed by an attorney, and we can do a very quick preliminary assessment just to make sure that they're a good candidate for the H-1B lottery.
Yeah, because not everybody is. There are basic legal requirements, and we don't want to waste your time or your money or get somebody's hopes up by putting them into something that they're not qualified for. So Linda and our team are very thorough and detail oriented and want to make sure that we're setting everybody up for success. And so that's another reason why we like to start early, and we also incentivize you to contact us right away so that we have enough time, bandwidth, clarity to make sure that you're only entering people into the lottery who have a viable case. Okay. Because and I guess some of the places where somebody might not be eligible, right, is if they don't have a bachelor's degree, or maybe they don't, but we're going to try to get their experience evaluated, but then they don't have enough years of work experience, or
Mhm.
their degree doesn't match the job, or there's been recent case law saying that the job role is not considered a specialty occupation, like professional enough. Or maybe the company doesn't have enough money to pay them the prevailing wage. So are there other buckets of general issues that tend to arise?
I mean, I think we work with a lot of startups, so
Yeah.
we have to make sure that the company is a valid business entity and they have secured their FEIN before we can put them
Yeah,
into the portal. So if you're
that's
thinking
true.
about it, get that going right away is my
That's
advice.
true. We work with a lot of early stage companies, and sometimes people have the misassumption that you have to have like 20,000 employees to be able to qualify. But we've literally done this for tons of first hires, startup founders, pre-revenue startups. So if you're interested, we would love to have that assessment with you to make sure, because maybe you can do it. Okay, and so let's say you've engaged with us, we've gotten your electronic registration in. Great news, we find out by April 1st that the candidate has been selected. How do we find out? Who do we tell first? What happens next? How does that all work?
Yeah, so USCIS will announce selections by April 1. So sometimes it's a couple of days before, and they communicate that through this portal where we've entered the registration. So as soon as we know if your candidates have been selected, then we're going to reach out to the company first just to confirm that they want to still continue and support this H-1B. Because we'll have 90 days to file the petition, but we want to see if they would like to proceed because sometimes things do change.
Yeah, sometimes the candidate has already quit or something. So, we just have to verify that everybody is still aligned before we move forward.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And so then, at the time of filing, that's when the government filing fees will become due. They did confirm that the registration fee will remain $10. So we include that for you when you hire us to do the registration. But the government filing fees for the full H-1B petition due June 30th, those are going to be in the range of $2,000. We are expecting an increase, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but maybe it'll go up to $2,000 for an early stage startup. A lot of these fees are statutory, so this is super lawyer jargon, but they're doing a regulatory fee increase, so that doesn't affect the fees governed by statute and laws passed by Congress. So not everything will change. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. And so what goes into the actual H-1B petition that we're crafting for the company when somebody has gotten selected in the lottery, Linda?
Yeah, I mean, we have to pull together the documents to support that this position is a specialty occupation, the company is financially viable, and that the individual, if they're in the US, we have to show that they're maintaining their valid immigration status. And
Yeah.
then really the first kind of step of the process, I would say, is preparing this labor condition application, which is a filing with the Department of Labor, attesting to the prevailing wage, and the working conditions. And that has to be posted at two places at the work site location.
So we've gotten H-1Bs for people who fully work from home. And also there's a lot of hybrid companies where maybe they have a small office or the teams have quarterly on-sites. If you're doing remote work, what types of locations can the notices be posted in?
Yeah, I mean this just kind of makes me laugh a little bit. It's pretty silly. So if you're supposed to post it so that any US workers in that worksite location are aware. And they have essentially an opportunity to complain to Department of Labor, which it really doesn't make any sense. So you would essentially post it on your refrigerator or your bulletin board if you're working from home.
Yeah,
Um,
so we
you
can figure it out.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is well known in the
it's silly. Yeah.
immigration field. Okay. There's always a lot of interest in supporting recent graduates, people with master's degrees, people about to graduate in May or June. So that raises some particular topics around OPT, STEM OPT, cap gap, travel that we like to talk about. So let's first start off with, what if you're hiring a Stanford student who's going to graduate with their master's degree on June 21st? What is their chance of being selected in the lottery?
So as long as you're able to show that they have met the degree requirements before the H-1B petition is filed, we can proceed with the registration. It can take a while for the diploma to get issued, so we can be creative. We can get a letter from the registrar, we can get the final transcript, but we need to have that in hand so that we could submit that as part of the petition by June 30th.
Yeah, yeah. So it's great. It means that if you're hiring somebody who's about to get their first master's degree in the US, that will give them an advantage of being selected in the lottery. And another thing I just like to point out here is, let's say your company does on-campus recruitment and the next batch of students or graduates is going to start in July, and they're still in school now. You can put them in this year's H-1B lottery to work for you in the future. So it's a great way to give your new recruits every chance of being selected. And I think that the willingness to put people in the lottery and support them really conveys, just respect for your team and can incentivize people to want to stay and contribute for the long term, which is of course important to any business, and especially small and medium-sized businesses and early stage technology startups. Okay, now it's a lot on this slide.
I know.
What is cap gap, and who do we want to help here?
I think that what to know about cap gap, and this is just for F1 OPT or STEM OPT students. So when they're applying for the lottery, sometimes their OPT or STEM OPT expiration date is going to fall between April 2nd and October 1, right? And so like that's the end of their work authorization. So cap gap is a way to bridge the gap and when their work authorization card expires and until an H-1B cap petition can be adjudicated. But this is only for people that are selected in the lottery and they file an H-1B petition with USCIS before their work authorization card expires. So
Yeah.
just getting that receipt notice from USCIS, you can use it as an employer for your I-9 verification, showing that it will extend their status till September 30th, 2024.
Yeah, it's a really handy way to bridge like somebody's work permit expiring in June so that they don't have to leave and they can just stay and work for you all summer until their H-1B kicks in October. So if you have any candidates who are on their very final possible year of OPT or STEM OPT, we definitely want to know that when we start helping you. And so like, let's say they majored in engineering and they just finished their regular OPT, but now they're going to apply for STEM OPT. They don't need this, they don't qualify. But if they're a law student, they only get 1 year of regular OPT and no STEM OPT,
Right.
we can use this to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and I would say part of our assessment process is identifying people that are falling under this cap gap so that we can let the company know, look, we are going to have to file a petition quickly. So they understand the time pressure and the timeline.
Yeah, and like 1 year, I remember I was helping all these like Berkeley students that had OPT, STEM OPT ending like May 15th. And so they got selected April 1st, and we were needing to expedite their cases because instead of the full June 30th deadline, we needed to make sure that we got their H-1B filed by their STEM OPT expiration date. So
Yeah.
some of the things we managed for you, so you don't have to worry about them. Okay, now let's talk about travel, because this is really important for everybody anywhere, international travel, and how you do it if the beneficiary is in the H-1B process. So first of all, what's a change of status and who qualifies?
So if you're in the US in a valid non-immigrant status at the time we filed the H-1B cap petition, so you're selected, we filed the petition and you're here as, let's say, a F1 student or J1, whatever that status is, you may be eligible to change your status in the US so that you don't have to leave the country and that you will effectively become an H-1B on October 1 when the case, but the case gets adjudicated, but that's when the status is effective because the H-1Bs start with the federal fiscal year. So October 1, you'll convert over to H-1B.
Yeah. I think, well, for somebody who already has, okay, Linda, what would you say this year, what is it, 2024, for now, for this time, January 2024, let's say there's somebody from India, they're on regular OPT, they're gonna get STEM OPT, and their H-1B just got selected, and we have the option to choose a change of status if we want. Or they could sneak preview, do consular processing abroad. And they're like, well, I want to maintain my chances for, I don't know what. Would you advise them to stick with the change of status if they can qualify and they're here already?
I mean, I think that's going to be the safest approach, to be
Yeah,
honest.
I do
There's
too.
always risk involved when you do consular processing because now you've added another step to the process where you have to go home, get a visa stamp in your passport, and those times can swell. You could get stuck in administrative processing. So it is best if you can convert over to H-1B, but I do understand that some people are just hesitant to do that and they want to work and continue in OPT or STEM
Like
OPT.
I think for some people, if they know that their company is going to take a long time to start their green card, they want to delay utilizing their H-1B until they're sure the green card process is about to start, to use up all their OPT that's available in STEM OPT, and allow themselves more time to ensure that they can get ultimately like H-1B extensions. But I don't think that's really necessary based on timing and yeah, and just it's an election year, so I would encourage everybody to just get their H-1Bs as quickly and smoothly as possible.
Agreed.
Okay, but if you are outside of the United States, or you know that you absolutely must engage in international travel in the summer and you're okay waiting for a visa, or you need to for sure travel in fall, how does consular processing work?
So consular processing is simply leaving the US, applying for the H-1B visa stamp at your home country at a US consulate or embassy, and doing like the online visa application, going in for an interview. And then once your passport gets the stamp, then you can enter the US with your approval. But the entry date can only be around October 1 or later. I mean, you could come in 10 days earlier, but you can't start working until October 1.
Yeah. And this is where we're starting. I think we could talk about the H-1B pilot program for stateside visa stamping here a little bit. That program is imminent. What is the State Department testing?
Well, right now it's a very narrow test. They're just offering H-1B visa stamps for those who have held H-1B status that were either issued in India or Canada over a very narrow window of time. So it's an in-country visa stamp where you're mailing your passport in and you're applying with the Department of State in the US. And it takes about 8 weeks for them to put the stamp in the passport, but then you avoid travel. So it's It's nice. I mean, we'll see how the pilot program goes. I know there's a limited amount that they're offering, and I think it's 4,000 per week over the next
Yeah.
5 weeks.
So my hope would be at the end of this pilot program, they launch mail-in visa stamping for all H-1B holders and O-1s and other types of work visas. And then let's say you're from India and you're in California and you need to go to London and you have to get a visa. This way you could avoid going to Canada or to India for a visa stamp. You could mail in your passport, get it back, and you could just travel to London and come back in. So that's what they're trying to effectuate in 2024 as much as possible in this administration. So knock on wood, hopefully that'll come through and hopefully that'll help whatever whoever gets selected in this year's lottery. Okay, so if you choose a change of status, but then there's some sort of family emergency or something, and you do have to travel over the summer, I would say please talk to Linda first before you go anywhere.
Yeah, I
Because
mean, there's like a narrow exception, but we have to like make sure everything is just right for you to travel.
yeah. So basically, if you get selected, pick a change of status if you can. And if you pick a change of status, it's best to just stay put if you
Mhm.
can. But if something happens, we can help figure it out. Okay. So before we get into questions, we're going to share a little bit on some of these changes. We've alluded to a lot of them, and we're expecting this new guidance really any day now. The government published the H-1B modernization rule in the Federal Register last year in fall, and people had until December 22nd to write in their comments. And what the government is trying to do now is figure out how to launch a one chance per candidate lottery system, which maybe we'll have in place by March, hopefully, based on passport number. I don't know. Maybe the dual citizens will slip through the cracks if they have two passports, but they're trying to make it as fair as possible. One exciting thing that I do want to share that I've been thinking a lot about, writing a lot about, and worked hard to make happen is that if you're on this webinar and you're a founder of a company and you want an H-1B to work at your own company, it is now possible. So your startup can put the founders into the H-1B lottery this year, whether the founders are inside the United States or outside the United States. And the legal change that made this possible is that the government basically released their interpretation of the law and the legal logic that kind of like wipes away our old assumptions that you have to dilute your equity below 50% or you need to find a 3-member board that can hire and fire you. So it's a lot of freedom, which is amazing for startup founders. And basically, if you own the majority of your company, even if you're a solo founder, we can put you in the lottery if you want to try to get an H-1B to work at your own company. Now, if you can qualify for an O-1, you probably don't want to deal with the prevailing wage of the H-1B, but if you just want a chance, definitely worth participating. And then we've talked about some of this, Linda. Can you walk us through some of these other possible H-1B updates that we're seeing or anticipating imminently?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing about the cap gap, which we talked about when your OPT card automatically gets extended to September 30th if you're waiting for your H-1B petition to be adjudicated. It used to be it gets extended till September 30th. With the new modernization rule, that will actually extension will go through April of 2025, April 1, 2025. So that's great. There's not as much pressure, and then the company might not have to premium process you, and you can
Yeah.
get the cap gap for longer. You mentioned, Sophie, about barring multiple registrations by the same beneficiary who gained the system. I'm just still baffled by that. I can't imagine finding like 60 or 50 companies to register you. Just blows my mind. And
A
then
lot of
obviously,
job interviews and a lot of offers. That's a lot of work. That's like 5 full-time jobs.
yeah, that sounds terrible. Like,
You
how do
could
you
have gotten an
manage that?
O-1 with all that energy.
Right, exactly, exactly. So I'm just perplexed. But then we talked about the flexibilities for co-founder. We also touched on the pilot program. And then we're seeing some fee increases. We know for a fact there's going to be an increase in the 15-day premium processing fee, which is a USCIS adjudication fee that you pay for 15-day processing. They're going up to 2805 as of February 26th. We do expect the other filing fees to increase. And they've been toying with the registration fee increasing, but as of this week, the latest is it's going to stay at $10, and that's been confirmed by a couple of government sources, so I'm pretty confident about that piece. I
We
know.
were on pins and needles a few days ago, like,
Yes.
how do we do this? But we don't have to this year. We'll deal with it next year. Okay, great. Well, now we can get to our segment for Q&A, and we have lots of questions in the Q&A panel, so thank you so much. And also thank you, Alex, for putting our email hello@alcorn.law into the chat window. And I'll also put, oh, I have a book if you want to buy the book on Amazon, and I'll put our contact information here for everybody. So let's start with, we're talking about we're talking about travel restrictions. Let's just assume that somebody, let's take somebody on cap gap. Let's just say their work permit ends June 30th, and we've filed their H-1B for a change of status by June 30th, and now it's July, and maybe they have a valid F1 visa. Would you recommend they travel in summer?
No, I mean, there's the only limited exception where they might be able to travel. They did extend it a little bit to cap gap, is you have to have that H-1B approval notice in hand. And then you have to come back into the US and be here on October 1st when it becomes effective.
Okay.
But there's still risk. I mean, I think when you go and come back into this to US, in the US, CBP is going to say, where's your work authorization card? Where's your, so we can, the nice thing about, if we have people that know they're going to travel, with setting this whole cap gap aside, we can always plan it. You can go to
Yeah.
that wedding in May, and then you come back May 30th, and then we'll file the petition, right?
Yeah.
We have 90 days, so.
Yeah. What if somebody has valid OPT through the summer and a valid F1 multiple entry visa in their passport, and we're seeking a change of status? That could theoretically be okay for summer travel, right?
Yeah, it can be, but they'll have to
Want to
make
be
sure they
careful.
come back in before October 1, because that's the date the H-1B would be effective, and the H-1B has to be approved before they depart.
Yeah. Okay, great. We got another travel question here. For consular processing, if I travel outside the US, get my H-1B visa stamped, and my OPT and EAD card is still valid, can I come back 10 days prior to October 1st with my current F1 OPT status? And then if I do that, do I need to leave and come back to the US again after 10 days prior to October 1st to activate my H-1B status? I mean, the only time a change of status becomes effective on October 1st is if we have selected the box for change of status.
Mhm.
So if you're doing consular processing and you get a visa and you come in on an H-1B visa, then you can come in up to 10 days before October 1st and you will be in H-1B status. And so we can work with your employer to navigate that one. Okay. We have a question about founders and H-1Bs. Can a founder be from a different country other than the US? For example, can a founder get an H-1B and then come to work on her startup in the US? Yes, absolutely. We can help founders who are outside of the United States use their US startups to sponsor themselves for an H-1B visa to be able to come here and live here and work here. Okay, we also have some questions on benching and various consulting topics. It's a little bit off what we're focusing on here, but maybe we can make some comments. Just want to be helpful to everybody who's listening. Somebody's a consultant doing H-1B projects. One project ended in November. The next project started in January. There's a 1-month employment gap. They want to understand if leave without pay was appropriate for December, and then how do they prove that they were maintaining their H-1B requirements, such as an employer-employee relationship wondering if things like medical insurance could be evidence and how to approach it. So I would say this is a little bit outside the scope. People can go on maternity leave, for example, when they're on H-1B. Linda, any general thoughts on that one?
I mean, I think the big difference here is if you are on a voluntary leave versus an employer not paying you because there's no productive work to be done. So voluntary leave of absence or voluntary leave, whether it's medical, personal, you can do that and still maintain your H-1B status, but that has to be initiated by the employee. And in this case, it sounds like it's an employer obligation where they failed to pay the individual. So we could do a consultation on something like this and dig a little deeper. It's hard to give answers without having all the circumstances and facts.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then somebody else asked, yeah, exactly, on a similar topic about
Mhm.
like what is the prevailing wage and no benching and what's an unpaid leave agreement if that's between an employer and the employee. I think you covered that, voluntary versus employer mandated
Mhm.
benching. Okay, thank you. Um, do we also help with perm? Yes, we do. And then about our fees and the way we charge. So typically for an H-1B, there's different elements that go into your budget that you need to consider. One is if you get selected in the H-1B lottery, then the government filing fees of about $1,500 to $2,500 will become due. Premium processing roughly another $2,500. So it could be $4,000 or $5,000 for the government. Most immigration lawyers charge flat fees to prepare and file the petition. For example, for many types of H-1Bs, if we're doing the whole thing, our legal services are typically around $5,000 or $6,000. But the way we charge for the lottery, if you hire us before February 20th, is it's $2,000 per beneficiary to initiate, and then we charge the balance for anybody who gets selected if you want to follow through and file the full petition in spring. But our fee will go up by $2,000 after February 20th. So if you want to hire us, there's definitely the time to do that now. And then the way we work with companies and our service level agreement, which we call our client services agreement, that lays out all of our flat fees for all case types that we do. And we do help with perm and I-140s, EB-2, EB-3, also a variety of other visas and green cards as well. So that's all laid out. And as an HR person or a founder, if you're interested in engaging our services to represent your company for immigration, we'll be happy to share that agreement with you after a consultation. Okay, and then here's another question. Somebody is looking for, they're interested in the nonprofit cap exemption for H-1Bs. So we didn't cover this in the lottery today because in the webinar today, because we're talking about the lottery here, but we can talk about this a little bit. If your candidates don't get selected in the lottery or you need an H-1B at another time of the year, we have been very successful in helping our clients get H-1Bs without the lottery for their employees. And there's a couple of exemptions to the lottery that can qualify for part-time or full-time work, such as working at universities, nonprofits affiliated with universities, and nonprofit research institutions. And the H-1B modernization rule that's about to be released will also have new guidance, most likely, on what types of nonprofits qualify for the university affiliation and the research exemption. They're trying to broaden the definition to help more organizations qualify. But in general, and this ties in to another question that we'll also answer right now. In general, there are many organizations that have thought about becoming qualified to sponsor individuals for cap exempt H-1Bs, whether it's in the nonprofit affiliated with the university category or the research category. There's only been one organization so far that has been able to consistently deliver this outcome for our clients that we've continually worked with, and we're open to working with more or helping people set these up. There's different ways to do it. But the one that we've had a lot of experience with and a lot of success with for many, many of our clients over the years, whether it's a change of status or consular processing, is Open Avenues Foundation. They have a university affiliation. They just recently released another program called the Build Fellowship, where more organizations can start their own fellowship programs. So if anybody's interested in starting their own with them, we're happy to facilitate that as well. But I don't currently know of any organizations that are out there specifically to solve this same sort of problem from a research-based nonprofit standpoint. So happy to have further consultations and, meet with people who want to discuss creating that. But there's only been one go-to where we are able to consistently refer our clients so far, and that would be Open Avenues. And so if you need an H-1B without the lottery, happy to make that referral. And I would say if you're going to do the lottery for somebody, the use case where you might want to start Open Avenues now is if you definitely want to get the person here like in March or April or May, and you're not willing to wait until October for the lottery start date, and somebody needs to come here now to start working, we could pair that type of H-1B and then see if they get selected in the lottery to leave that program after 6 months for an October start date. So there's lots of ways to do this. Any other thoughts on cap exempt through nonprofits, research, universities, Linda?
I mean, I think, we have worked with entities that file their first cap exempt H-1B. So,
that's true. Like they
Yeah.
don't offer it as a service to other organizations, but they've done it internally for their own employees. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And
those are
sometimes
fun.
they've been a little tricky. Like, does that entity qualify? And, we're looking at documents from like the 1800s for one of them, I remember.
Yeah,
So,
because these like nonprofit auxiliaries from universities are so old, and then they're like, oh, we need to hire this person. We're like, wow, you could use this. But it's sort of
Yeah.
like magical when they realize they have that power.
yeah. So that's something we could definitely explore and entertain and do a consult to assess.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, seeing no further questions, we will conclude at this juncture. Thank you so much, Linda, for doing
Oh,
this
you're welcome.
with me, and great. And thank you, Alex, for getting everything organized and sharing all the resources in the chat window. And thanks to all of our participants, and we'll get out the information shortly, and please do get in touch with us. We would love to help you. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much.